Hi everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Anna. Today I have a new story for you. The words are simple, and this story is good for beginners. The story is called Learning to Swim. It's about a woman who decides, at 45 years old, to finally learn something she was always afraid of. Let's start. Carol Jenkins was 45 years old. She lived in a small house near the sea, with her husband, Paul, and their 2 children, who were now grown up and lived in other cities. Carol had a good life. She had a job at a school, she had good friends, and she loved her garden. But there was one thing Carol had never done in her whole life: she had never learned how to swim. When Carol was a child, she almost drowned in a lake during a family trip. She was only 6 years old. Her father pulled her out of the water quickly, and she was okay, but after that day, Carol was always afraid of deep water. Carol still remembered small pieces of that day clearly, even after almost 40 years. She remembered the cold water closing over her head. She remembered not being able to find the surface, her small arms and legs moving wildly, panic filling her whole body. She remembered her father's strong arms finally pulling her up, and the sound of her own coughing and crying afterward, lying on the grass by the lake, wrapped in a towel. Her parents never talked about the accident much afterward, perhaps not realizing how deeply it had affected young Carol. Nobody suggested swimming lessons to help her feel safe in the water again. Instead, Carol simply learned, quietly and privately, to avoid water altogether, a habit that followed her through her entire childhood and into her adult life. She avoided swimming pools. She avoided the beach, even though she lived so close to the sea. When her children were young, she always sat on the sand and watched them swim, never joining them in the water. For almost 40 years, Carol lived with this fear. She told herself it didn't matter. Many people don't swim, she thought. It's not a big problem. But one summer, everything changed. Carol's grandson, little Max, was visiting for a week. He was 5 years old, and he loved the water. One afternoon, at the beach, Max ran toward the waves, laughing and shouting. "Grandma, come swim with me," he called. Carol felt her heart beat fast. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to run into the water with her grandson, the way a normal grandmother would. But her feet stayed firmly on the sand. "I'll watch you from here, sweetie," Carol said, forcing a smile. Max ran off happily to swim with his mother, but Carol sat alone on the sand, feeling sad. That night, lying in bed, she thought about her fear. She thought about all the years she had missed, all the pool parties, all the beach days, all the moments she had watched from the side instead of joining in. "Do you ever think about how much time we've already spent avoiding things?" Carol asked Paul quietly in the darkness. "Sometimes," Paul admitted. "But I think the important part isn't the years we lost. It's what we decide to do with the years we still have." Carol lay awake a while longer, thinking about this. She was 45 now. Not old, exactly, but no longer young either. If she waited any longer, she thought, the fear would only become more comfortable, more familiar, harder to challenge with each passing year. "I don't want to feel this way anymore," she told Paul that night. "I want to learn how to swim." Paul, surprised but supportive, squeezed her hand. "I think that's a wonderful idea," he said. "It's never too late." Carol mentioned her decision to her closest friend, Linda, over coffee a few days later, feeling slightly embarrassed admitting such a thing at 45 years old. To her relief, Linda didn't laugh or seem surprised at all. "My mother learned to drive a car at 60, Linda said, smiling. "It's honestly never too late for anything, Carol." "Good for you." Still, doubt crept into Carol's mind over the following days. What if she wasn't able to learn properly at her age? What if the other students were much younger, and she felt embarrassed? What if, after everything, she was still too afraid to actually get into the water? Despite these worries, Carol kept returning to the image of Max's disappointed face at the beach, and to the quiet sadness of all those years spent watching from the sand. Whatever the risk of embarrassment, it felt smaller than the risk of continuing to miss out on her own life. The next morning, Carol looked online for swimming lessons. She found a class at the local community pool, specifically for adult beginners, people who had never learned to swim before. The class met twice a week, in the morning, for 8 weeks. Carol felt nervous just reading about it, but she signed up anyway before she could change her mind. Before officially signing up, Carol called the pool's front desk to ask a few questions, her voice slightly shaky as she explained her situation to the friendly receptionist on the phone. "I'm 45, and I've genuinely never learned to swim," Carol admitted, feeling strangely vulnerable saying this out loud to a stranger. "Is this class really okay for someone starting completely from nothing?" "Absolutely," the receptionist reassured her warmly. "We get adults of all ages in that beginner class every session. You'd honestly be surprised how common it is." This small reassurance helped Carol feel slightly less alone in her fear, and she completed her registration that same afternoon, printing out the confirmation and placing it on the refrigerator, where she would see it every single day leading up to her first lesson, a constant reminder of the promise she had made to herself. On the first day of class, Carol stood outside the pool building, holding her new swimsuit and towel, feeling like a child on her first day of school. She almost turned around and went home. But she took a deep breath and walked inside. The pool building smelled strongly of chlorine, a smell Carol had always associated with fear rather than fun, unlike most people who found it comforting or nostalgic. She stood in the changing room for several minutes longer than necessary, adjusting her swimsuit, checking her hair, finding small excuses to delay walking out to the pool area itself. Finally, hearing other nervous voices nearby, presumably other beginners in her same class, Carol gathered her courage and walked out toward the water. Inside, she met her teacher, a friendly young woman named Jenny, who had taught adult swimming classes for many years. There were 5 other students in the class, all adults, all nervous like Carol. "Don't worry," Jenny said, smiling at the group. "Everyone here is starting from zero. Nobody will judge you. We'll go very slowly, step by step." Carol felt a little better hearing this. She looked around at the other students. There was a man named David, maybe 50 years old, who said he never learned to swim because his family was too poor for lessons when he was young. There was a young woman named Priya, only 25, who was simply afraid of water her whole life, without a clear reason. And there was an older woman named Grace, 70 years old, who said she decided it was now or never. During that first lesson, while everyone waited nervously at the edge of the pool, the small group naturally began sharing their reasons for finally learning to swim, something Jenny gently encouraged. David explained that his grandchildren had recently started asking him to come swimming with them at family gatherings, and he was tired of always making excuses. Priya admitted, a little shyly, that she had turned down a wonderful vacation with friends the previous year simply because it involved a boat trip, and she didn't want fear to keep controlling her choices anymore. Grace, laughing warmly, said that after her husband passed away the previous year, she decided she wanted to try everything she had always been too nervous to attempt, starting with swimming. "We're all in the same boat," Grace joked, and everyone laughed a little, the nervous energy in the room becoming a little lighter. The first lesson didn't even involve real swimming. Jenny had everyone simply stand in the shallow end of the pool, where the water only reached their waist, getting used to being in the water at all. Carol felt her heart beating fast just standing there, but she reminded herself that the water was shallow, and she could stand up easily if she needed to. "Just breathe," Jenny said calmly, walking around the group. "Feel the water. It's not going to hurt you." By the end of the first lesson, Carol had only put her face in the water a few times, blowing bubbles, something Jenny said was an important first step. It felt small, almost silly, but Carol left that day feeling proud of herself, prouder than she expected to feel about something so simple. Over the next 2 weeks, the class slowly progressed. They learned how to float on their backs, with Jenny's hand supporting them gently at first. Carol found this part very difficult. Floating meant trusting the water to hold her up, and trusting felt hard after so many years of fear. Each time Jenny slowly began removing her supporting hand, Carol's body would immediately tense up, her legs sinking downward, her arms flailing slightly as she tried to stand up again. She watched enviously as some of her classmates, particularly Grace, seemed to float almost naturally, relaxed and calm on the water's surface. "I can't do it," Carol said one morning, after sinking for the third time trying to float. "My body just won't relax." "That's completely normal," Jenny said kindly. "Your body remembers being scared, even after all these years. We just need to teach it something new, slowly." Carol kept trying. During the fourth week, something finally clicked. Jenny slowly removed her supporting hand, and for just 3 seconds, Carol floated on her own, looking up at the ceiling, the water calm around her. "I did it!" Carol shouted, standing up quickly, water dripping from her face, a huge smile spreading across it. "You did!" Jenny said, clapping. The whole class clapped too, genuinely happy for her. That evening, Carol called her daughter excitedly. "I floated today. By myself. For 3 whole seconds." Her daughter laughed warmly. "Mom, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you." However, progress didn't continue perfectly smoothly. During the following lesson, Carol arrived at the pool feeling tired after a poor night's sleep, and nothing seemed to work correctly. She sank instead of floating. She swallowed water and coughed loudly, embarrassed in front of the whole class. By the end of that difficult lesson, Carol felt like she had gone backward instead of forward. "I think I'm just not meant to do this," she told Paul that evening, feeling discouraged. "Everybody has bad days," Paul reminded her gently. "Remember how proud you felt just last week? That hasn't disappeared. One difficult lesson doesn't erase all your progress." Encouraged by Paul's words, Carol decided to visit the pool by herself one extra time that week, outside of the regular class, simply to practice quietly without the pressure of other students watching. Paul came along to watch from the side, cheering her on quietly as she practiced floating and simple kicking in the shallow end. By the end of that extra practice session, Carol felt her confidence slowly returning. "See," Paul said, smiling. "Still got it." Carol laughed, feeling much better than she had a few days earlier, reminded that setbacks were simply part of learning something new, not a sign that she should give up. During the 5th week, the class started learning actual swimming strokes, starting with simple kicking while holding on to the edge of the pool, then slowly adding arm movements. Carol struggled at first, her arms and legs not moving together correctly, water splashing everywhere, but David, the man in her class, offered encouragement. Jenny broke the stroke down into small, separate pieces, first practicing the arm movement alone while standing in the shallow water, then practicing the leg kick alone while holding a foam board, and only combining both movements once each felt comfortable individually. "Don't try to do everything perfectly at once," Jenny explained patiently, watching Carol struggle to coordinate her arms and legs together for the first time. "Your brain can only focus on one new thing at a time properly. Slow down." Carol tried again, this time focusing only on her breathing and arm movement, allowing her legs to kick naturally without overthinking them. To her surprise, this small adjustment made an immediate difference, her body moving through the water slightly more smoothly than before. Breathing correctly turned out to be one of the trickiest parts of the whole process for Carol. Jenny explained that many beginners instinctively held their breath the entire time underwater, out of fear, which actually made floating and swimming considerably more difficult, since a held breath tightened the whole body unnecessarily. "Try turning your head to the side and breathing out slowly through your mouth, into the water," Jenny suggested, demonstrating the movement slowly at the edge of the pool. "Then turn back and breathe in through your mouth above the surface. Slow and steady, like humming a quiet song to yourself." Carol practiced this rhythm repeatedly, feeling clumsy and awkward at first, swallowing more pool water than she would have liked during her early attempts. But gradually, after many repetitions across several lessons, the rhythm began to feel more natural, something her body started remembering without her having to consciously think through every single step. "You're better than you think," David told her one morning. "I watched you last week. You've improved a lot already." Carol appreciated David's kindness. Over the weeks, the small class had become close, encouraging each other during difficult moments, celebrating each other's small victories. During the third week, Priya, who had struggled badly with putting her face underwater since the very first lesson, finally managed to submerge her entire head for a few seconds, holding onto the pool edge tightly. When she came back up, gasping slightly but smiling widely, the whole class erupted into applause, several classmates splashing water playfully in celebration. "I actually did it," Priya said, half laughing, half crying with relief. "I've been scared of that exact thing for 25 years. Carol felt herself genuinely moved by Priya's small victory, understanding completely the enormous weight behind what looked, to an outside observer, like such a tiny accomplishment. Similarly, during the 6th week, Grace surprised everyone by swimming 5 entire meters unassisted, something nobody, including Grace herself, expected her to accomplish so soon. She stood up afterward in the shallow end, breathing heavily but grinning from ear to ear, raising both arms triumphantly above her head like an Olympic athlete. "Not bad for 70 years old," Grace announced proudly, and the entire class laughed and cheered together. Around this time, Carol's daughter arranged a video call so that little Max could see his grandmother, mostly to talk about an upcoming birthday, but Carol couldn't help mentioning her swimming lessons excitedly. "Grandma is learning to swim, just like you," Carol's daughter told Max, holding up the phone. "Really?" Max said, his small face lighting up with excitement on the screen. "Can you swim across the whole pool yet?" "Almost," Carol said, laughing. "I'm getting better every week. Maybe by summer, I'll be able to swim with you properly." "I can't wait," Max said seriously, and Carol felt her determination grow even stronger after seeing his genuine excitement. "We're like a little swimming family now," Grace said one morning, laughing. By the 6th week, Carol could swim a short distance by herself, though her technique was far from perfect. Her arms moved awkwardly, and she needed to stop and stand up every few meters, but she was actually swimming, moving through the water using her own strength, something she never thought possible. The 7th week brought a new challenge, the deep end of the pool. Until now, the class had only practiced in the shallow end, where everyone could stand up if needed. Moving to the deep end, where the water was far over everyone's heads, felt terrifying to Carol. The night before this lesson, Carol barely slept, her old childhood memory of the lake returning vividly in her mind. She lay awake beside Paul, imagining the deep, dark water, feeling her heart race just thinking about it. "You don't have to go, if you're not ready," Paul told her quietly that morning, noticing her nervousness over breakfast. Carol thought about this for a moment, then shook her head firmly. "No," she said. "I've come too far to stop now. I need to at least try." At the pool that morning, several of her classmates looked just as nervous as Carol felt. David admitted quietly that his hands were shaking. Priya said she felt sick to her stomach. Only Grace seemed calm, though even she admitted her heart was beating faster than usual. "I don't think I can do this," Carol admitted, standing at the edge, looking down at the deep blue water. Jenny stood beside her patiently. "You don't have to do it today," she said. "But I think you're more ready than you believe. Your body knows how to swim now. The fear is just old habit talking." Carol stood there for a long moment, remembering that day at the beach with little Max, remembering all the years she had watched from the sand instead of joining in. She thought about how tired she was of being afraid. Slowly, carefully, Carol lowered herself into the deep end, holding tightly to the pool's edge at first. Jenny stayed close beside her the whole time, calm and reassuring. Carol let go of the edge, and for a moment, panic rose in her chest. But then, her body remembered its training. She kicked her legs, moved her arms, and swam, slowly but steadily, across the deep end of the pool. When she reached the other side and grabbed the edge safely, Carol burst into tears, tears of relief, of pride, of 40 years of fear finally releasing. "I did it," she said quietly, then louder, "I did it." The whole class cheered loudly, even Jenny had tears in her eyes, having watched Carol's incredible progress over the past 7 weeks. The 8th and final week of the class ended with a small celebration. Jenny brought a cake, and each student received a small certificate saying they had completed the beginner swimming course. Carol looked at her certificate proudly, something so simple, yet representing such an enormous personal achievement. The whole class gathered around a small table beside the pool, still slightly damp from their final lesson, sharing cake and taking photos together. David promised to bring his grandchildren to the pool the following weekend, finally ready to swim with them properly. Priya announced she had already booked the boat trip vacation she had turned down the previous year, determined not to miss it a second time. Grace simply smiled, saying she planned to keep learning new things for as long as she possibly could. "Thank you for teaching me," Carol told Jenny, hugging her. "You gave me something I've wanted my whole life, without even fully realizing it." "You did the hard work yourself," Jenny said. "I just showed you the way." That weekend, Carol's family visited again, including little Max, still excited about swimming as always. This time, when Max ran toward the beach shouting for his grandmother to join him, Carol didn't sit down on the sand. Instead, she walked into the water beside him, holding his small hand, both of them laughing as the waves gently splashed around their legs. The water felt cool against her skin, the sand soft beneath her feet, and for the first time in her adult life, Carol felt no fear at all standing in the sea, only pure, simple joy. "Grandma, you're swimming!" Max shouted, amazed and delighted. "I am," Carol said, smiling brightly. "Your grandmother learned something new this summer." They swam together for almost an hour, Carol teaching Max some of the simple things Jenny had taught her, both of them laughing and splashing in the warm summer water. At one point, Max floated on his back beside her, copying exactly the technique Carol had practiced so hard to learn, and Carol felt an overwhelming wave of pride watching them float together, side by side, grandmother and grandson, finally sharing this simple joy. Paul watched from the beach, taking photos, genuinely moved seeing his wife finally join their family in the water after so many years of watching from the shore. That evening, sitting together as a family, eating dinner outside as the sun went down, Carol felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time, complete happiness, without any small piece of regret hiding underneath it. "I'm proud of you, Grandma," Max said sleepily, leaning against her shoulder. "I'm proud of me too," Carol said softly, smiling, and for the first time in 40 years, she truly meant it. In the months that followed, Carol continued swimming regularly, joining a small group of adult swimmers at her local pool who met every weekend. To her surprise, David, Priya, and Grace joined this same weekend group too, none of them wanting to lose the progress, or the friendship, they had built together during those 8 weeks of lessons. They often joked that Jenny's beginner class had accidentally created a small, permanent swimming club. By the following summer, almost a full year after her first nervous lesson, Carol swam regularly at the beach near her house, no longer simply watching from the sand. She even convinced Paul, who had always known how to swim but rarely joined her, to swim together most weekend mornings, something that quickly became one of their favorite shared activities. She never became an incredibly fast or graceful swimmer, but that was never really the point. The real victory had already happened, the day she finally let go of the edge, and trusted herself, and the water, to carry her forward. And that's the end of today's story, Learning to Swim. I really like this story because I think it shows something important. It's never too late to learn something new, even something we've been afraid of for our entire lives. Before you go, think about this. Is there something you've always wanted to learn, but felt too afraid or too old to try? Maybe, like Carol, today could be a good day to start. Thank you so much for listening today. This has been Anna, and this is the podcast. See you in the next episode. Take care, and keep practicing your English.